Now, moving on to the next one, which is the US. We've sort of touched on this 2 weeks back, but last week we didn't really speak too much of it. Barry, you've been keeping close contact of what's actually going on there. It really looks like there's so many people saying so many different things.
Yeah, it's really confusing in the US at the moment. I think they have a real leadership problem right now because obviously you've got Trump at the helm and Trump is doing some crazy things that look ridiculous to everyone involved. And then you've got all the various states underneath him that are trying to do their best for their particular state.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen in the media and what I've been reading about is a lot of like infighting between the state governments and the federal government, right? Because every state is trying to look after their people, but also trying to look after the economic impact, trying to look after the jobs, etc. And so they're trying to balance these various considerations. And so the federal government hasn't actually come in and given a real national-wide kind of way forward or an action plan. And so a lot of people are a bit confused as to what is going on. Is there a lockdown? Isn't there a lockdown? How are we trying to deal with it? Are we keeping businesses going? Are we shutting them down, et cetera, et cetera? And so there's lots of confusion right now in the US. I think that they are they're starting to hit the exponential part of the curve. We've seen cases grow at incredible speeds in the last couple of days. And like you mentioned at the top of the episode, they are now the number one number of cases. They have the highest number of cases across the world. And so the US is really struggling with this. I think one of the reasons they're struggling, Chad, and what I wanted to chat about is the nature of American liberty. Like kind of the way that America runs is just on this pure freedom, liberty at all costs. That's kind of the major value in their society. And so a lot of their citizens are actually fighting against lockdowns because they feel like it imposes on their liberty. And it does, right? When the government announces that you're going to lock down the country, you're going to try and stop businesses from running and stop people from leaving their homes, etc., you're almost imposing some sort of martial law. And so obviously it's for a good cause in this instance, but people are very worried about the precedent it might set as to how much power the government actually has. So a lot of American citizens are trying to fight back against the lockdown, probably against their better interests, but trying to maintain that feeling of freedom and liberty. And that's very American. It's a very American idea. And so the question is this going to bite them in the bum? Is that kind of like freedom at all costs kind of mindset going to mean that they're going to keep their economies open too long and let the virus spread until it peaks? And that's a big concern, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Especially given the lag in terms of the data and the tests. There's that 3-week lag that we know about. So yeah, I mean, that's really is concerning. I mean, if we look at the UK and the initial approach that they took, which was more of a sort of persuasive, we advise you to do it this way. That's kind of one potential way where the US could, keep their liberty intact. But now the question is compliance. And in terms of the UK and the reason why they had to escalate it to an actual lockdown was because of that compliance. People were still going on holidays on the weekend and really just not taking this seriously. What is the feeling that you get in terms of the US and the US citizens at this stage to keep that liberty right intact? Are they actually complying and taking part in this?
I think every state is dealing with it differently, right? So I watched an interview of Bill Gates on CNN, which was brilliant. And they were talking to him about the fact that there's various epicenters around the US that have the most cases. So like New York is a big concern, San Francisco is a big concern, and there's a bunch of states that have epicenters of the disease. And the guy on CNN was talking about, is it possible to do a quarantine of those major areas and let the rest of the country operate? So do kind of a quarantine that just isolates certain problem areas. And Bill Gates said that would be nice in theory, but unfortunately, because this virus spreads so quickly, if you don't do a full lockdown and lock everyone down, then you might as well not do a lockdown at all. You might as well go for a different strategy because the virus is going to get out because of the people that are asymptomatic. And because of the amount of travel that's still happening in the United States. I mean, Chad, I sent you a picture of the flight radar, the amount of domestic flights still in the air in the US. And it is terrifying. There are thousands of flights still in the air going between states. And so if you don't lock down the whole of the United States, it's hard to see how a selective quarantine process might work. Some states are fighting for that because they might have only 500 cases in their state, and so they're trying to protect their economy because they haven't seen the medical impact yet. But if you talk to people in New York who are dealing with thousands and thousands of cases and death rates rising every single day, they obviously want the whole country to be shut down because of people coming in and out of New York all the time.
Yep.
And so I don't quite know what's going to happen. I think that a federal government's going to have to come in at some stage and make a national kind of emergency or a national game plan. But when you look at Trump, it doesn't fill you with confidence because all he's talking about is keeping businesses open. He's talking about his ratings. He's talking about all sorts of nonsense. It's hard to see his administration delivering a game plan that everyone buys into because there's such polarity in the states. Like there's the Trump states and there's the non-Trump states. And the non-Trump states are not going to want to listen to him at all. And so I think we're going to see the political divide in the US is really going to be under the spotlight here. And whether they can get the act together or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. I mean, we've only seen Trump bragging about the economic strength of the country under his reign. We saw that at the World Economic Forum, and so obviously he's trying to sort of keep hold of that for as long as possible, especially when economies around the world are just crashing. But now, at what point, Barry, does it become completely reckless? At what point do worldwide organizations have to actually step in and say, guys, if you're not doing anything, you're actually posing a real threat for the human race?
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's now. In my personal opinion, I feel like they are negligent right now. It really worries me when I read the stuff coming out of the States. And obviously, I know that it's all sensationalized and it's all over the top in the media. So I'm trying to take it with a pinch of salt.
Yep.
But based on the Twitter conversations that I've seen and the people that I respect who are living in the States and are talking out about this, people are really worried about the fact that they feel like the government has been negligent for too long and it's taken too long to put these things in place. So obviously now we have the $2 trillion stimulus package. We have some of the kind of help coming in, but they worry that it's a week or two too late.
Yeah.
So I don't know when is too late. I don't know how an international organization could step in though, because if you think about it, I don't know who that's going to be to step in.
Yep.
I think that the US has got to fix themselves, and I think all other countries around the world are going to have to block travel from the US as best they can. Because that's the only way to kind of isolate them. In my personal opinion, I feel like the US, because of their poor response to this pandemic, have kind of lost their authority as the moral leaders of the world, right? For a long time, the US was seen as the moral high ground, kind of the shining light that we looked for moral guidance and for superpower guidance in a way. And it feels like the US over the last couple of years, because of the Trump thing and because of all the nonsense that happened there, is slowly starting to lose that authority. And so whether people take them seriously or not, I don't know anymore.
Yeah, really interesting question. I mean, if we just put into perspective the numbers that are coming out of the US, Barry, your stat here is that, we've got 15 states now that have more than 15,000 cases. And if you actually looked at China, they only had one province outside of Hubei, where, Wuhan sits, which had that many cases. So, yeah, certainly a lot more widespread. Obviously, they're at the top of the list in absolute numbers. But that certainly does put into perspective the geographical spread of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of shows that it's not just a New York situation. It's not just a San Francisco situation. It really is spread out across the states. And so they have to act very quickly. And I think in a national interest, I can't see a way where each state is doing different things that's going to work. I think they have to pull together and they have to have some sort of federal regulations or federal shutdown if needed. Or some other strategy, because if they keep going the way they're going, I think they can hit that exponential curve, and then we're going to start to see some real panic there.
Across the pond.